43 people are dead in the Caribbean Sea. The United States military has conducted 10 separate strikes since September. Boats have been destroyed, bodies recovered, families are grieving. But here's what's strange. The U.S. government won't say who these people were, won't provide evidence they were drug traffickers, won't explain the legal basis for the killings. Meanwhile, 12,000 American troops are deployed in the Caribbean, the largest military presence there since the Cuban Missile Crisis. The CIA has been authorized for lethal covert operations inside Venezuela. And just yesterday, Venezuelan President Maduro announced his country possesses 5,000 Russian-made anti-aircraft missiles. This isn't a declared war. Congress wasn't consulted. Most Americans have no idea it's happening. But it is happening. And the deeper you look, the stranger this story gets. You're on Warfront Alert. And coming up, I'm going to show you everything we know and everything we don't know about the hidden military operation unfolding in the Caribbean right now. No spin, no politics, just the facts, the questions, and the implications. Let's investigate.
Let's start with what we can verify. Here's the complete timeline. September 1st, 2025, first strike. Location, Caribbean Sea, approximately 80 miles north of Venezuelan coast. 11 people killed. The U.S. government claims they were members of Tren de Aragua, a Venezuelan gang. Trump posts strike footage on Truth Social. September 15th, second strike. 3 killed, same region. September 19th, third strike. 3 more killed. October 3rd, fourth strike. 4 killed. October 14th, fifth strike. 6 killed. Trinidad and Tobago later announces they're investigating whether 2 of their citizens were among the dead. October 18th, Colombia's president, Gustavo Petro, publicly accuses the United States of killing a Colombian fisherman whose boat was adrift, calls it murder. October 21st, sixth strike, Eastern Pacific Ocean, first operation outside the Caribbean. Location? Over 1,000 miles from original theater. October 22nd, 7th and 8th strikes. 2 operations in 24 hours. 1 Caribbean, 1 Pacific. 7 killed total. October 24th, 9th strike. First night operation. 6 killed. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth calls this a milestone in 24/7 operational capability. Total casualties as of October 25th, 2025, 43 dead. 2 captured and returned to their home countries. That's the official count. But here's the first major question. Who were these people? According to Axios reporting, the U.S. military has killed at least 32 people without telling Congress or the American people who was killed or on what evidence. Think about that. The U.S. government has conducted military strikes resulting in 43 deaths and has provided 0 public evidence about the identity of those killed. No names released, no cartel affiliations confirmed, no photographs of seized drugs. Nothing. We have Trump's word. We have Defense Secretary statements, but we have no independent verification. The evidence problem: Colombia says at least 1 victim was an innocent fisherman. Trinidad and Tobago is investigating whether 2 of their citizens, also fishermen, were killed. Families in coastal communities from Venezuela to Trinidad are asking, where are our missing relatives? The Guardian interviewed family members from a Trinidadian fishing village. One woman said, "He went out to fish, he never came back. Now they tell me maybe he was killed by Americans? For what? He was just trying to feed his family." PolitiFact investigated Trump's claim that each boat interdicted saves 25,000 American lives. Their finding? Pants on fire rating. The math doesn't work. If true, just 5 boats would account for 125,000 deaths, nearly double all overdose deaths in a year. So we're left with a critical question. Is this counter-narcotics or something else? Now let's talk about the military deployment.
Because this isn't just about boat strikes. According to CNN, Axios, and defense sources, here's what the United States has deployed to the Caribbean in the past 8 weeks. Naval Forces. USS Gerald R. Ford Aircraft Carrier Strike Group. Minimum 3 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers. 2 confirmed nuclear-powered attack submarines. Multiple Coast Guard cutters. Hospital ship USNS Comfort on standby. Air Forces. 12+ F-35C Lightning II stealth fighters. 6+ FA-18 Super Hornet strike aircraft. 2 B-1B Lancer strategic bombers, rotational deployment. MQ-9 Reaper drones, 24/7 surveillance. P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft. Multiple surveillance and reconnaissance platforms. Ground Forces. 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit, 2,200 Marines. 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit, 2,300 Marines. Special Operations Forces, numbers classified. CIA paramilitary officers, numbers unknown. Total visible deployment, over 12,000 military personnel. To put this in perspective, this is the largest U.S. military presence in the Caribbean since 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis. But here's what makes this deployment unusual. It happened with almost no public announcement, no major presidential address, no congressional debate, no UN consultation. The forces just appeared. The B-1 bomber incident. On October 23, flight tracking data showed a U.S. Air Force B-1B bomber, tail number 86-0135, flying along the Venezuelan coastline. The aircraft entered Venezuela's flight information region for approximately 15 minutes, flying within 50 nautical miles of the coastline. When asked about it, Trump denied it. No, it's not accurate, it's false. But multiple open-source intelligence accounts documented the flight path. Flight Readout 24 data confirms the bomber was there. So either A, Trump is lying about the bomber flight, B, Trump doesn't know what his military is doing, or C, Trump is maintaining plausible deniability for a classified mission. None of those options is reassuring. The CIA authorization. On October 15th, Trump confirmed, then attempted to walk back, that he authorized CIA operations in Venezuela. Reporter: why did you authorize the CIA to go into Venezuela? Trump: I don't want to answer that question, but I think Venezuela is feeling heat. According to the Washington Post, Trump signed a presidential finding authorizing the CIA to conduct lethal covert action against cartel networks and potentially Maduro regime targets. A presidential finding is the legal mechanism that allows the CIA to conduct covert operations. It requires presidential signature and notification to congressional intelligence committees. But the catch is, notification doesn't mean approval. The president can authorize CIA operations and simply inform Congress after the fact. What does lethal covert action mean in practice? Historically, it has included assassinations of foreign leaders or operatives, arming and training insurgent groups, sabotage operations, psychological warfare campaigns. The CIA has done all of this before in Iran, 1953, Guatemala, 1954, Cuba, 1961, Chile, 1973, Nicaragua, 1980s, and Afghanistan, 1980s to present. Now, apparently, Venezuela. The legal gray zone. The United States justification is this. The United States is in a non-international armed conflict with drug cartels, which are classified as transnational criminal organizations with capabilities equivalent to terrorist organizations. Under this framework, The president can use military force under Article 2 of the Constitution, Commander-in-Chief powers, and the 2001 authorization for use of military force against terrorist organizations. But legal experts are divided. Brian Finnecune, former State Department legal advisor, told NPR, "What this boils down to is the president asserting a prerogative to kill people based solely on his own say-so." Senator Rand Paul called it extrajudicial execution. Senator Mark Warner, a member of the Gang of Eight Intelligence Committee, said he was not briefed before operations began. So we have a situation where the military is conducting strikes, Congress wasn't consulted in advance, no public evidence has been presented, international allies are protesting, and the operations are expanding. Which brings us to the most important question: what is the actual objective here?
So here's the Trump administration's justification for all of this. America is facing the deadliest drug epidemic in its history, and these military operations are saving lives. Let's examine that claim. The fentanyl crisis. The data. According to the CDC, approximately 107,000 Americans died from drug overdoses in 2023. About 70,000 of those deaths involved fentanyl. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid 5,100 times more potent than morphine. Just 2 milligrams, an amount that fits on the tip of a pencil, can be lethal. Most illicit fentanyl enters the United States through the southwest border with Mexico. DEA reports indicate that Mexican cartels produce fentanyl using precursor chemicals largely imported from China, then smuggle it into the U.S. But some fentanyl also arrives by sea, speedboats running drugs from South America through the Caribbean to Florida and the Gulf Coast. How much comes by sea? That's unclear. The DEA doesn't break down maritime trafficking as a percentage of total fentanyl imports, but Coast Guard interdictions suggest it's a smaller percentage compared to land routes. The results claim. Trump says the Caribbean operations are working, and there is data to support a broader trend. According to the CDC, drug overdose deaths in the United States fell by approximately 24% in the 12-month period ending September 2024, from about 114,000 to 87,000. That's roughly 27,000 fewer deaths. Trump has attributed this to his tough-on-cartels approach. But here's the complication. Correlation is not causation. Overdose deaths began falling in early 2024 before Trump's Caribbean boat strikes began in September 2025. Other factors that likely contributed to the decline: expanded access to naloxone, overdose reversal, medication, increased addiction treatment funding, fentanyl test strip distribution, public awareness campaigns. Some states' harm reduction policies. So, did Trump's boat strikes cause the overdose decline? That's impossible to determine definitively. The counterfactual question. Here's what we can't know. Would overdose deaths have fallen anyway without these military operations? We don't have a control group. We can't run the experiment twice, once with boat strikes and once without. What we do know is this: the Trump administration claims the operations have reduced Caribbean maritime drug trafficking by over 80%. But they haven't provided data to support that claim. No interception statistics, no before and after drug seizure comparisons, just the assertion. The human cost calculation. Trump has said that each boat interdicted saves 25,000 American lives. PolitiFact investigated this claim and rated it pants on fire. The math doesn't add up. If each of the 10 boats eliminated saved 25,000 lives, that would be 250,000 lives, more than double the total annual overdose deaths from all drugs combined. So the administration's numbers are, at minimum, greatly exaggerated. What we can conclude? The fentanyl crisis is real and devastating.
Overdose deaths are declining. Good news. The Trump operations may have contributed to that decline, but the administration's specific claims are unverifiable or exaggerated, and we have no way to assess whether the same results could have been achieved through less lethal means. This brings us to a fundamental question. Even if these operations are reducing drug trafficking, is military force without due process the right approach? That's a question without an easy answer. It's a question about values, law, and what kind of country we want to be.
And now we arrive at the most alarming development in this entire story. On October 23, 2025, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro held a televised military meeting. And what he announced should concern everyone paying attention to this situation. Maduro looked into the camera and stated, "Any military force in the world knows the power of the Igla-S, and Venezuela has no less than 5,000 of them in key air defense positions to guarantee peace." 5,000 Russian-made surface-to-air missiles. He continued, "We have them even in the last mountain, the last town, and the last city of the territory." Let me explain why this matters. The Igla-S missile system. The Igla-S, NATO designation SA-24 Grinch, is a Russian man-portable air defense system, MANPADS. It's the latest generation of Russian shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missiles. Technical specifications. Range, 6 kilometers, 3.7 miles. Altitude, effective from ground level to 3,500 feet, 11,500 feet. Speed, can engage targets traveling up to 400 meters per second. Guidance, 2-color infrared seeker. It resists countermeasure flares. Warhead, 1.17 kg blast fragmentation. What makes the Igla-S particularly dangerous is its guidance system. Unlike older MANPADS that could be fooled by flares, the Igla-S uses a 2-spectrum infrared seeker that can distinguish between an aircraft's heat signature and decoy flares. Translation, standard countermeasures don't work. The numbers question. Does Venezuela actually possess 5,000 of these missiles? The International Institute for Strategic Studies, IISS, a leading defense research organization, confirms that Venezuela does possess Igla-S systems. They were delivered by Russia over multiple arms deals from 2005 to 2020. But 5,000? That number is difficult to verify independently. For context, Ukraine, fighting a full-scale war with Russia, has perhaps a few hundred of these systems. The Taliban in Afghanistan had approximately 500 Stinger missiles at their peak. Venezuela claiming 5,000 would make it one of the largest MANPADS arsenals in the world. Is Maduro exaggerating? Possibly. But even if the real number is 2,000 or 3,000, that's still a massive air defense capability. Other Russian military systems. Maduro didn't stop with the Igla-S. Venezuela also possesses Ka-31A Krypton anti-ship missiles. Launched from Su-30 fighter jets, Venezuela has 21 of these aircraft. Speed, Mach 3.5, 2,600 miles per hour. Range, up to 110 kilometers. Purpose, specifically designed to sink destroyers and carriers. The war zone called these Venezuela's most relevant anti-ship asset. Other Russian weapon systems. SA-300 long-range air defense. Range up to 150 kilometers. Can engage multiple targets simultaneously. Effective against aircraft, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles. Russian military advisors. Multiple reports indicate Russia maintains a military presence in Venezuela, including technicians and trainers. The geopolitical context. Why is Russia arming Venezuela to this extent? Venezuela sits on the world's largest proven oil reserves, but under Maduro's socialist government, the economy has collapsed. Millions have fled the country. Russia and China have provided economic lifelines, loans, investments, and military equipment in exchange for access to oil resources, a strategic foothold in the Western Hemisphere, and a check on U.S. influence in Latin America. From Putin's perspective, Venezuela is a low-cost way to create problems for the United States close to home. Just as the U.S. supports Ukraine on Russia's border, Russia supports Venezuela in America's backyard. The military implication. If the United States were to conduct a ground operation in Venezuela, those 5,000 missiles would create a lethal environment for American aircraft. Every helicopter, every transport plane, every close air support mission, all of them would be vulnerable. Former Pentagon officials have called a Venezuela invasion an extraordinarily costly in American lives. Maduro's strategic calculation. By publicly announcing the missile arsenal, Maduro is doing two things: deterring the United States, sending a message that an invasion would be bloody, and rallying domestic support, positioning himself as standing up to American aggression. But this strategy has a dangerous downside. It could provoke the United States into taking action before Venezuela can fully deploy these missiles. The Russian response. When asked about Venezuela's missile announcement, the Kremlin said, Russia has legitimate defense cooperation with Venezuela. These are purely defensive systems. But there's nothing purely defensive about arming a government that's protecting drug cartels trafficking into the United States. And this puts the situation in a different context. This isn't just about drugs anymore. It's about Russian military power in the Caribbean, competing spheres of influence, a proxy conflict between nuclear powers. And that should concern everyone, regardless of their views on Trump or drug policy.
Now let's look at how the international community is responding to this operation, because the diplomatic consequences are mounting. Colombia, a major rift. Colombian President Gustavo Petro, a leftist leader, but traditionally a U.S. ally, has publicly condemned the U.S. operations. On October 18, Petro announced that a Colombian fisherman was killed in the September 16 strike. His boat was adrift, engine broken, when it was destroyed by U.S. forces. Petro's statement, "The United States is committing murder in international waters. They have killed innocent Colombians." Trump's response? He froze $500 million in annual U.S. aid to Colombia. Petro then threatened to close Colombian airspace to U.S. military flights. A massive problem, since U.S. counter-drug operations rely on overflight rights through Colombia. This is significant because Colombia has been one of America's closest partners in the drug war for decades. Plan Colombia, the multi-billion-dollar counter-narcotics initiative, relied on U.S.-Colombian cooperation. That cooperation is now severely damaged. Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago's government announced it's investigating whether two of its citizens were killed in the October 14th strike. The Guardian interviewed family members from Cedros, a fishing village on Trinidad's southwestern coast. One family member said, "We haven't seen him since October 13. He went fishing, the boat hasn't come back. Now they're saying maybe Americans killed him? But he's not a drug trafficker. He's a fisherman." Trinidad and Tobago has requested information from the U.S. government about the strikes. As of October 25, the U.S. has not responded to that request. UN human rights experts. A group of UN human rights experts issued a statement expressing grave concern about the operations. Their statement, "Extrajudicial killings without due process violate international human rights law and the UN Charter. States must demonstrate that lethal force was absolutely necessary and that less harmful means were insufficient." The experts called on the U.S. to provide evidence justifying each strike, investigate allegations of civilian casualties, halt operations until legal frameworks are established. The U.S. State Department has not formally responded to the UN statement. Venezuela's diplomatic offensive. Maduro has called emergency meetings with the Organization of American States, ALBA, and the Non-Aligned Movement.
Venezuela is positioning itself as a victim of U.S. imperialism and extrajudicial aggression. Whether you agree with Maduro or not, he's successfully framing the narrative in much of the international community as powerful country attacking weaker neighbor without due process. Russia and China support for Venezuela. Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, issued a statement: the United States is conducting unlawful military operations in the Caribbean. Russia stands with Venezuela's right to self-defense. China's foreign ministry spokesperson said, China opposes the use of force in international relations. Disputes should be resolved through dialogue and negotiation. Both countries are using this situation to paint the U.S. as a unilateral aggressor. NATO allies' silent concern. Interestingly, traditional U.S. allies in Europe have been mostly silent. No public statements from the United Kingdom, France, Germany, or Spain. Behind closed doors, European diplomats have expressed concern to U.S. officials about the lack of transparency and legal justification, according to Politico reporting. But publicly, silence. European leaders don't want to publicly criticize a U.S. operation against drug cartels. The legal question. International law experts are divided on whether these operations violate the UN Charter, Article 2, prohibits the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. The law of the sea. Maritime interdiction operations have specific legal requirements. International human rights law. Extrajudicial killings without due process violate international human rights law. The U.S. position is that these are non-international armed conflict operations against non-state actors, like the cartels, which gives them different legal standing than state-to-state conflict. But many legal scholars dispute this interpretation. The precedent concern, perhaps the biggest concern among international observers, is precedent. If the United States can unilaterally decide that suspected criminals on boats can be killed without trial or evidence, what stops other countries from doing the same? Could Russia claim Chechen terrorists are on boats in the Black Sea and destroy them? Could China claim Uyghur separatists are on vessels and sink them? Could any nation claim self-defense and conduct extrajudicial killings? This is the fundamental tension at the heart of this operation: effectiveness versus legitimacy. So where does this go from here? Based on current intelligence, military deployments, and historical patterns, here are 4 possible scenarios. Scenario 1, sustained containment. Probability, 50%. The operations continue at current levels indefinitely. Boat strikes happen every 1 to 2 weeks. Caribbean maritime trafficking remains suppressed, but no escalation to land operations. This becomes the new normal, a permanent U.S. interdiction operation similar to anti-piracy operations off Somalia. What this looks like? 2 to 5 strikes per month, 10,000 plus U.S. troops permanently deployed in Caribbean. Annual cost, $3 to $5 billion. Duration, years, possibly decades. Challenges, cartels adapt, submarines, different routes, land trafficking increases. Diplomatic friction with Latin American countries continues. Congressional funding questions emerge. Possibility of collateral damage incidents increases over time. Why this is likely? It's working, somewhat. It's sustainable, cost-wise, and it doesn't risk major escalation. Scenario 2, limited escalation, airstrikes on land targets. Trump authorizes expansion to land-based targets inside Venezuela. Drug processing facilities, cartel airstrips, and logistics hubs. Using cruise missiles and high-altitude bombers, the U.S. strikes targets without putting troops on the ground. What this looks like? Initial strike package, 50 to 100 Tomahawk cruise missiles, B-1, B-2 bomber missions against fixed targets. CIA intelligence directing strikes. Venezuela's S-300 systems attempts to engage, possibly shoot down a U.S. aircraft. Challenges. Intelligence accuracy. Are the targets actually cartel-related or civilian? Venezuelan air defenses are more capable on land. Risk of significant civilian casualties. International condemnation intensifies. Potential for Venezuela to retaliate. Cyber attacks. Supporting attacks on U.S. interests. Why this might happen? If Trump determines boat strikes alone aren't enough and wants to go to the source. Scenario 3, regime change operation. Probability 15%. CIA-backed coup attempt against Maduro. The U.S. arms Venezuelan opposition forces, provides intelligence and air support, and attempts to trigger a military uprising. This is the Bay of Pigs 2.0 scenario. What this looks like? $10 to $30 billion in covert funding, weapons flowing to opposition groups like Maria Corina Machado's movement, U.S. Special Forces training rebels outside Venezuela, assassination attempts against Maduro or key military leaders, information warfare campaign to turn Venezuelan military against Maduro. Challenges? The Venezuelan military may stay loyal to Maduro. He's been purging dissenters for years. Russia could deploy advisors to Venezuela, triggering direct U.S.-Russia confrontation. High probability of failure. Coups are unpredictable. And if it fails, U.S. loses credibility and Maduro becomes stronger. Why this might happen? If Trump decides Maduro himself is the problem, not just the cartels. Scenario 4, full-scale invasion. Probability 5%. U.S. conducts a large-scale ground invasion to topple Maduro and eliminate cartel infrastructure by force. This is the Iraq 2003 scenario. What this looks like? 50 to 150,000 U.S. troops, amphibious landings along Venezuelan coast, airborne assaults to seize Caracas, heavy urban warfare, occupation lasting months or years. Challenges: 5,000 Igla-S missiles would create high U.S. casualty rates. Urban warfare in Caracas would be devastating. Cost: $100 billion plus. International condemnation would be severe. Occupation and reconstruction would be lengthy and expensive. Potential for Venezuela to become another Iraq or Afghanistan. Why this is unlikely? The costs far outweigh the benefits, and Americans have no appetite for another lengthy occupation. However, this becomes more likely if Venezuela shoots down a U.S. aircraft, creating political momentum, a major terrorist attack on U.S. soil is linked to Venezuelan cartels, or Trump faces a domestic political crisis and needs a rally around the flag moment. The wild cards. 1. Russian response. If Russia deploys S-400 systems more advanced than S-300 or sends military advisors, this could trigger a direct U.S.-Russia confrontation. 2. Chinese economic leverage. China has invested heavily in Venezuelan oil. If the U.S. invades, China could retaliate economically. Tariffs, bond sales, tech restrictions. 3. Domestic U.S. politics. Congressional opposition could force Trump to scale back. Or, conversely, a major drug trafficking incident could give Trump political capital for escalation. 4. Accidental escalation. A U.S. aircraft accidentally shot down. A Venezuelan military unit firing on U.S. forces. A CIA operation going wrong. Any of these could trigger rapid escalation. Most likely timeline: next 30 days, November 2025, continued boat strikes, possible expansion into Pacific waters off Colombia or Ecuador, CIA operations intensify inside Venezuela. 60 to 90 days, December 2025, January 2026, decision point: either operations reach a steady state, scenario 1, or Trump escalates to limited airstrikes, scenario 2. 6 months out, spring 2026, if maritime trafficking remains suppressed, operations continue. If trafficking adapts and increases, pressure builds for more aggressive action. The X factor, the 2026 midterm elections. If Republicans lose seats in November 2026, congressional oversight increases. If they maintain or expand power, Trump has more freedom to escalate. Bottom line,
We're most likely looking at Scenario 1, sustained containment through at least early 2026, with a 25% chance of escalation to Scenario 2. Full invasion, Scenario 4, remains unlikely unless something dramatic changes, like a major U.S. casualty event or clear evidence of state-sponsored attacks on American soil.
So here we are, 33 minutes into this investigation, and we're left with more questions than answers. Let me lay them out clearly. Question 1. Who were the 43 people killed? Were they all cartel members? Were some innocent fishermen? We don't know. The U.S. government won't say. Families are grieving, and they deserve answers. Question 2. What evidence justified each strike? Satellite surveillance? Human intelligence? Intercepted communications? We don't know. Zero evidence has been made public. Question 3. Is this operation actually reducing fentanyl deaths? Overdose deaths are falling, but did the boat strikes cause that? Or would it have happened anyway due to naloxone, treatment, and awareness? We can't separate correlation from causation. Question 4. Does the president have the legal authority to conduct these operations without congressional approval? Constitutional scholars disagree. Congress hasn't challenged it. So for now, it continues in a legal gray zone. Question 5. What's the real objective? Is this about drugs? Or is this about regime change in Venezuela? Trump has hinted at land operations. The CIA is authorized for lethal action. This feels like more than just counter-narcotics. Question 6. What happens if Venezuela shoots down a U.S. aircraft? With 5,000 Russian missiles deployed, it's not a question of if they can, but when they might. What's the U.S. response? Full invasion? Limited retaliation? De-escalation? There's no clear exit strategy. Question 8. What's the cost? In dollars? In lives? In diplomatic relationships? In international norms? We're getting some answers, but not the full picture. The bigger context. This operation is happening in a world where Russia is arming adversaries in our hemisphere, China is expanding influence in Latin America, international law is increasingly ignored, and military force is becoming the first option, not the last. And perhaps most troubling, it's happening with almost no public debate. No congressional hearings, no major media coverage, no national conversation about whether this is the right approach. Just silence. While 12,000 troops are deployed, 43 people are dead, and the potential for serious escalation grows. Why this matters? Whether you support or oppose these operations, you should demand transparency. You should demand evidence. You should demand that your elected representatives explain the legal basis, the strategic objectives, and the exit plan. Because in a democracy, the people have a right to know when their government is conducting military operations that could lead to war. What we'll be watching. In the coming weeks and months, Warfront Alert will continue investigating this story. We'll be tracking every new strike and military deployment, congressional responses or lack thereof, international diplomatic developments, whether drug trafficking actually decreases, any evidence of civilian casualties, Russian and Chinese responses, and the truth about the 43 people killed. This story is far from over. In fact, it may just be beginning. Your role. If you found this investigation valuable, here's what you can do. 1. Subscribe and hit the notification bell. This story develops daily. You need to stay informed. 2. Share this video. Most people have no idea this is happening. They should know. 3. Demand answers from your representatives.
Contact your senators and representatives. Ask them, have you been briefed on Caribbean military operations? Do you support continued strikes without congressional authorization? What oversight mechanisms are in place? 4. Leave a comment with your analysis. Do you think these operations are justified? Should the U.S. be conducting strikes without providing evidence? What would you do if you were making these decisions? What questions do you want answered? I read every comment, and your perspectives help shape how we cover this story. Final thought. 43 people are dead in the Caribbean. We don't know who they were. We don't know if they were all guilty of crimes. We don't know if this operation is making America safer or creating more enemies. We don't know where this leads. But we do know this. Democracies die in darkness. When governments conduct military operations in secret, without oversight, without evidence, without debate, that's when things go wrong. That's how we ended up in Vietnam, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. Not because Americans are bad people, but because we didn't ask enough questions. We didn't demand enough transparency. We trusted too much and verified too little. This time, let's do better. Let's ask the hard questions. Let's demand real answers. Let's hold power accountable. That's what Warfront Alert is here for. Objective analysis, verified facts, no spin, no propaganda. Just the truth, however complicated it may be. This is Warfront Alert. Stay informed, stay skeptical, stay engaged. The next chapter of this story could be written in the next 48 hours, and you deserve to know what's happening. I'll see you in the next investigation.